And now it is render time. First, we will talk about rendering in Lumen, then Lumen and ray tracing combination, path tracing, and how to render with Cryptomate masks and import after that into Photoshop or DaVinci Resolve. So let's first start with creating the movie render queue, and let's have a look at what we can get in the movie render queue for this type of shots. Let's go first to our previous shot. Let's go into game mode. So what we are going to do and how we're going to render that, we will be using movie render queue. To access movie render queue, you can either click here Windows Cinematics movie render queue, or if you have your open, you can click it here and use always movie render queue. Don't use movie scene capture legacy. It's just like redundant, and you don't have that much of render settings compared to movie render queue. So hit there and it will automatically add your shot there. But first, let's just set up render of our tunnel shots and Porsche shots. So let's go with this garage shots first, and now we will create a simple preset. This is lazy preset, which I use mostly when I do my YouTube videos or something like that, but this has its downsides and I'll explain why. So first of all, that lazy preset will give you the best performance in editing afterwards in DaVinci Resolve, because we are going to render in ProRes. What is the downside of using the ProRes? Anyway, it is like high quality video. You have enough of information to color grade that, but if your render crashes in very between, like in the middle of the shot, you will lose the file. Well, the file will technically be at this point. It will be fine. It will finish at the render where it like crashed, but you will still need to re-render the whole thing, and it just like sometimes it's not useful. And also, what is good with the ProRes and EXR, like what is the difference? I mean, so in ProRes you can't have the Cryptomate masks, you can only have them in multi-layer EXR. So like for lazy approach, for quick render and best performance in DaVinci Resolve for Premiere Pro or any your editing software which you are using for editing videos, this is the best codec for the best and fastest playback. Okay, so we will do the ProRes for now, just for the experiment, for the sake of it. And then I go with anti-aliasing. For Lumen, you still need anti-aliasing for really quality motion blur. So technically, you never get real-time renders. They are not supposed to render in real time because you need a lot of spatial and temporal samples anyway if you're rendering and if you're aiming for really good motion blur. So for Lumen, I find like 4 by 32 really nice value. It's not that much. It just gives you nice motion blur, and the quality is just enough to create the picture from with good motion blur from Lumen. It's in total it's 128 samples, and you always need to override anti-aliasing because you need really nice values. Also, in anti-aliasing, you need to set up engine warm-up count frames. So usual is 50. It's usually enough because if you have multiple splines, as I said before, you can use multiple splines for multiple cars. And if in each different sequence you have different spline which the same car rig is using, it will jump into this spline and it needs some time to adjust the suspension and get onto the ground. So pay attention to that and always use engine warm-up count. It's really useful thing to do that. For now, we will go with a deferred rendering because we are going to render in Lumen, and we will not touch anything here for now. We don't need anything of those settings for this particular render. As I said, that's really lazy render which you can get. And after that, you can go and add also game overrides, which will force zero reloads. It will disable streaming and will disable the distance, the view distance, and so on. So this one you should have while rendering in Lumen. For path tracing, I think this is not necessary. It always uses zero loads, so the path tracing doesn't care basically about this one. So for path tracing, you can disable this thing or like not add this one. Then I add console variables, and this is like really tricky one. It depends on the situation, but most which I'm using are path tracing, depth of field, quality. Oh, sorry, are depths of field quality, not path tracing. The path tracing, we'll talk a little bit later about the path tracing settings. Depths of field quality, and set it to 5. You can always check what is the setting for this particular thing. If you just like move here, it will show you that it's like really high quality from 0 to 4, and there is like 5. If you actually, you can also type in the command here, depth of field quality, and put the question mark in the end. And if you get output log, it will tell you what is like the highest quality of the settings, but you can go overboard just like for this particular reason. Also with the R motion blur quality, I'll go with 4, and for this one we can actually do also 4. And which one is also good to use is R screen percentage. Usually I use 150, which basically renders it at higher resolution, and then it will like multi-sample that into your desired resolution, which we will have here because we don't have any squeeze factor here, 16:9. So it will get it to your output resolution 19, like full HD or like 1080p, right? So it will just do that. For console variables, this is basically it most of the time, as the game overrides has a lot of like things like for shadows, the distance, and the like shadow distance scale, and so on and so on. You don't need to put it there. Some of them are not needed. You can also check the documentation for Movie Render Queue, what Epic Games suggests for adding here. And also what I would like to notice, don't use screen percentage if you don't have a lot of GPU memory. And if your memory like or GPU is not powerful enough, it will just blow it. It will overload your GPU memory and probably you'll get your render crashed. So just be sure that you have powerful GPU for using that setting, and at least like 8 or 12 gigs of VRAM. This is like really GPU intensive, like really much. So we have created this basic Lumen profile without any like color setup or something like that. So this one is just like fine. And let's save this as preset, name it, let's put it into our sequences. Let's create new folder, render presets, and name it like Lumen lazy one. And hit accept. Why it is good to save the settings, because if you pick another shot, right, it will automatically apply this this preset and those render settings. Because if you don't do that, it will just, you know, it will be like this, unsaved config, and you would need to set it up again for each shot. But if you have it saved and if you pick the shot, it will just pick this one which you set up previously before. So we have about 7 shots for garage shot, and oh yes, 5. That's enough. And now let's get our tunnel shots here. You can also like type tunnel, and I'll just copy that. You may be asking right now why you don't make the master sequence, put all of the shots in the master sequence, and why we need to add this one by one. The thing is, like, that comes from like my post-production studio background, where you need to have each shot separately. You need to save it to different folder, each of the shot, and have the different sort of versioning for each shot, and that comes from this one, because you can't define that one for each of the shot. And also what is important, when you have it in master sequence, between the shots, there will be no warm-up frames. And that means that while the rig is adjusting to the ground, you will have all those like probably 20 frames completely lost out of your render. So this is just like inefficient in that case. Also, let's put our each shot, like you can create actually folders by like date or like date and time or sequence name. And this will basically will create the folder for you for each sequence. You will have separate folder. This is a really good one if you are like supporting versioning or something like that. So basically in our studio we used the date time, and when you render you have like different date and different hour, and really you can see what is the versioning and how it was updated. The output resolution we will keep for now Full HD, and I never use custom frame rate. I always use 24 because this is it. And you can also add frame handle count, so you'll have some frames before and after, but that is probably redundant as we made the shot as we want, but you still can have that if you have longer animation, and you can extend in your sequence. You can extend this one, for example, and if I add 10 shots of handle frames, it will render from there. So from -10, it will render all where I have the camera cut track. It will render from here, then it will render the main comp, and it will render 10 frames afterwards. That's what the frame handles do. So that's how it works. But I don't use that. Usually when I work, I've got the brief, I got the animatic, and I already know how many frames. I will probably make the animation itself longer for 10 frames, so the editor can move this then on the timeline in editing software. Okay, so right now we can hit render, render local, we'll render it in the project. But this is like really tricky one. Sometimes if you have like hard project, heavy project, which crashes Unreal during the render, and if you do the render local, it renders like the first shot, then when the first shot is done, it just crashes Unreal and it doesn't render again. You can do render remote. It will run separate version of Unreal Engine, which will be only rendering, and it will not affect this main project, and it will not crash. So you can just like continue rendering without any troubles. Also, there's some like Python scripting and so on for rendering with the render farm and so on, but this is not about it. It's just like the neat trick to render outside of this current running projects in order not to crash the project when one shot is finished. So right now let's hit render. Oh, that's my mistake, which I did. See, for each of those shots, there is a map which it will be taken for render. And for these garage shots, we have separate level, right? So we need to pick this level, dark scene, which we created for all of these shots. And for tunnel is the same. We need to pick the tunnel. Right? So now it is correct and it will be working fine. Also, what I remembered that we used the anamorphic camera there. So for all of those shots in our previous render, that should be this resolution. So 1920 by 810. This is the resolution for our anamorphic camera, which I just like calculated, and that works fine. Okay, save preset, and if you save preset, that will apply to all of those shots, and when you hit render, it will prepare the shaders because it needs to load the different level, and it will start rendering, and it will be quite fast, to be honest, like 5 minutes per shot. Really, really nice. Because also, as I mentioned, I increased resolution by 150%, so it renders not full HD, but renders 2K and downsamples that to full HD. That is why it takes a little bit more time. But if I didn't do that, that would be probably faster. But anyway, 2-3 minutes for one shot, it's taken even faster. it really would look better. And as I said, this is really simple way to render that into single file, not the XR sequence with Apple ProRes. But if that crashes, well, that is not that good as if we had the EXR sequence. So I will not waste your time. We will just wait for this one to render, and we will get all rendered shots like just for preview so we can play them back. So when the render is finished, we can navigate here and watch at our shots. All is just crispy because of the increased resolution. I think all looks good, really nice here and there. So all of those shots will be rendered when you render ProRes. That all will be rendered in Rec 709. So you'll basically see what you see in the engine. You'll see the same in any editing software. So all the shots will be the same. So this is it. And it works pretty fine, as you can see here, for example, right? Because I told you like I'm too lazy to attach the lights to via the sequencer. This is like the result of my laziness, and why that happened, because it is attached to the blueprint, but that should be attached to the body. So you always need to add the lights of the car either inside of the blueprint, because in the blueprint you also can add the lights, just like if you go to the blueprint of the rig, any of them, just like that, for example. And here you can select the body and add point light, or for example this one that was spotlight, and just add the spotlight, which will be connected to the body, and just like place it properly somewhere there, and that will be working fine, right? But because I didn't do that, I was too lazy, just didn't want to waste your time. Or you either can connect that inside sequencer by attaching that to body component of the rig, and that will work fine. But here, well, okay, that is just like minor mistakes. So you should avoid that by not being lazy and just like take your time, spend your time on working on that. Otherwise, all looks good, all works. It right away, it's Rec 709. It looks perfect, just as was in the Unreal Engine as is intended. So for this one, it is done deal. All like see that fidelity of the details. There is just like some sort of wipes, there is dust. Well, anyway, it looks really nice. So next, I will not close this project for now, just to have it here. Let's get back to our scene, and now we will render the scene which we made with this HDRI, right? So with the car, as I said, dynamic steel. Let's change the color of the car, because I think just red one looks there the best, and I believe we can just like really have a nice one by using car paint red. I think that would be just like really good looking there. And we already have the sequence here, which is located in sequences. Let's just get to the HDRI. So as we discussed, we will use number 6 and 7 frames where the car passes. So, and right now let's do and render that as this one we can actually clear. We rendered all of that. So let's render HDRI, and we will use the same preset, right, for Lumen. But just a quick thing, I want to add some volumetric fog just a little bit, so it will not be making our background really dark. It will give us some like volume. Exponential height fog, change it to volumetric fog. Yep, a bit better, just too much. Let's decrease the amount of the fog density. So fog density, just a little bit like that. Cool, that looks fantastic. Probably let's change the bloom settings, because I think this one is just like too over bright. Let's just decrease that one. Like this is good. Okay, move your render queue again. Same setup, but here we need to set the frame count which we would like to render. So that would be 6 and 7. So let's use this, use custom playback range, 6 and 7, right? This one is 16 by 9. There is no anamorphic look, so that can be 1080p. Okay, we will not save this preset because it's our not main one. And for now, let's just use whatever. We can do the JPEG picture just for now. We'll get to proper renders a little bit later. And if I hit render local, that will render super fast, like blazing fast, because we have only one source of light. And if I go back to DaVinci and drop this picture here, you'll see that we have a proper motion blur. Sorry for that. I have the sequence timeline prepared for this anamorphic look. So if we zoom it like this, it's pretty fine, but still you can see there is some difference in contrast, but that will be already fixed on the color grading stage. But anyway, that looks fantastic. I think that looks really cool. So even that is Lumen, and it provides really high quality of the details. So if you can see like that, it just it looks like a photo. You can add even more samples to get even better motion blur on the wheels. And if you're rendering just one frame for the still, why not doing that? So that really looks cool, like really amazing, just phenomenal. I'm surprised how good that came out. And that's Lumen. It's like literally super fast render. So using HDRI obviously gives you this nice result. And that is for Lumen render. Now let's jump into render with ray tracing and Lumen. Frankly enough, for rendering Lumen with ray tracing, or rendering with ray tracing, we don't need to change anything in our render preset. What we need to do is change some settings in post-processing volume or in the project settings. The thing is, you can enable separately additional features or features that require ray tracing. So currently what we have here, it's using Lumen high quality translucency reflections. There is no ray tracing, and we rendered the previous scene completely without ray tracing, and it looked really cool. But there are a few things missing. For example, that Lumen actually only renders the reflections the way that what is in the frame. So it uses still screen space reflection. So if right now I'm looking at the car, as I think I mentioned that before, if I'm looking at the car paint right now, let's make it a little bit brighter. You see that I see what is happening on the other side of the tunnel. But if I move, you see how the reflections fade away. And we only see the reflections which are generated by light sources. As I said, it's really cool to support lights or emissive materials with actual lights. That is why we still see those reflections, right? But if we look like that, there is nothing, just dark. And this is not what we want, right? So for ray tracing, or for enabling features that require ray tracing, we need to change a few settings in post-processing volume. And that would be translucency. And for the translucency type, we need to change raster to ray tracing. And that will immediately give us something what we can't see, because there's additional lights I've put in the scene to light up the car, because it was really dark, and I just placed a lot of rectangle lights. So when the car is driving, there is even without the translucency, ray trace translucency, we still have something on the car, right? So it reflects it, it bumps, and have some reflections on the body, and basically making it a little bit more lit. So first thing, translucency, set it to ray tracing, and you will have much better reflections also. But what is the main thing is reflections. And for Lumen reflections, ray lighting mode. By default, it uses surface cache in the project default, but you can use heat lighting for reflections. Bam! See, you have all of those lights, all these red little lamps reflecting in the car body, which gives it so much feeling of presence and better reflections on the car body. But this feature requires ray tracing enabled. So you can also add more bounces, and it will give you maybe a little bit better reflections, and the number of bounces, if you have multiple translucency layers, that will just bounce more. And the same also is for ray tracing reflections and translucency reflections. This one really improves the look just so much, and you will get much better reflections on the car body and in car paint especially. And if I go to our sequence and open any of our like tunnel shots, let's see what we have here. See, we have those red lamps reflecting. We see more, and that gives a little bit of improvement there. And I really can't stress enough how good is that and how really it plays in those shots. So really, if you have the RTX GPU, look at that. It's just like so much better, right? And we have more details, more dynamic, because we have more reflections on the body. And basically for ray tracing, this is it. You use the global illumination as Lumen, but you can change the global illumination to ray tracing. But the thing is that Unreal slowly just gets rid of that, because it already says that it is deprecated, and it will be deleted at some point completely. So you can use the global illumination as ray tracing, right? So just as I changed right now, but just I don't know, that would be removed. Why you should be using that, right? So, and even right now, I feel like it's getting better. Also, another additional setting which you can find only in project settings, we already talked about that, is shadow, and use the ray traced shadows. They will be just like a little bit smoother, much more contrast, like for example here. And this is the full utilization of ray tracing using Lumen, and this combination can give you much better results than just Lumen. But as I shown you before, we can get, even with just Lumen, we can get, by supporting like these emissive materials with actual lights, we can get really, really high quality renders. And probably you can, if you do really good job on the lighting, you even don't need use the ray tracing. But the quality of the reflections, especially on the glass, is just so much better. Just look at this. Look at this. I don't see that. And if I change it right now for a translucency to raster, it will not be there. That's just like really annoys me that you can't have it. Just like, and disable heat lighting for reflections. So surface cache, like it's just not there. And it looks just so much cooler, just gives this little bit of details. But anyway, so for render, in that case, for the render profile here, Lumen Laser, you don't need to change anything, and because they're using this just deferred rendering, which is not path tracing. This will be just simple render with like proper stuff, and just a little bit more reflections on the body, on the glass, and all other parts which are on the car. So really just use it at your own discretion, what you think looks best. I just find personally it's better when you have more details and reflection like that. It just gives you this feeling of realism.